was 6:45 p.m. on a Tuesday evening when everything changed for Tanya Johnson. She was driving her old Honda Civic down Martin Luther King Boulevard, her mind focused on one thing: getting to the daycare before it closed at 7. Her two kids, 8-year-old Maya and 5-year-old Caleb, were waiting for her. Tanya worked as a social worker at the downtown community center. Her shift had run late because she stayed to help a family fill out housing applications. She always did this, putting others before herself. It was just who she was. The speed limit on the boulevard was 35, but Tanya was going 42. She knew she was speeding. But the daycare charged $5 for every minute parents were late. Money was tight in the Johnson household. That's when she saw the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. "Oh no, not today," Tanya whispered to herself as she pulled over to the curb. She turned off the engine and rolled down her window, placing both hands on the steering wheel just like her father had taught her years ago. Officer Blake Thompson walked up to her car with heavy steps. His partner, Officer Rick Davis, stayed by their patrol car but kept his hand near his weapon. Tanya noticed this right away. She had worked with enough families to know when a situation felt wrong. "License and registration?" Thompson barked without even saying hello. "Yes, sir, of course," Tanya replied politely. "I was just trying to get to the daycare before they close. My kids are waiting for me." Thompson didn't seem to care about her explanation. His face was stone cold. "I said license and registration. Now." Tanya reached slowly into her purse, making sure to announce every move. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. It's right here in my purse." This was something she had learned from community workshops. Always tell officers what you're doing. But Thompson stepped back and put his hand on his gun. "What are you reaching for?" "My wallet, sir. You asked for my license." "Don't get smart with me," Thompson snapped. "Get out of the car." Tanya's heart started racing. She had done nothing wrong except speed a little bit. "Sir, I'm just trying to get my license like you asked. I said get out of the car." "Now." Other drivers were slowing down to watch. Some were pulling out their phones, but they were too far away to get a clear view. Tanya looked around desperately, hoping someone would help, but everyone just kept driving. She slowly opened her car door and stepped out. "Sir, I don't understand what I did wrong. I was just speeding a little bit." "Turn around and put your hands on the car," Thompson ordered. Tanya did as she was told. Her hands were shaking now. In all her 34 years, she had never been in trouble with the police. She paid her taxes, volunteered at church, and helped people for a living. Thompson started searching her pockets roughly, much more roughly than necessary. "What's this?" he said, pulling out her phone. "That's my phone, sir." "Who are you calling?" "I wasn't calling anyone. I was just driving." But Thompson didn't believe her. He thought she had been recording him or calling for backup. His paranoia was taking over his judgment. Davis finally walked over from the patrol car. "Everything okay here, Blake?" She was reaching for something when I asked for her license. Acting suspicious, Tanya turned her head slightly. "Officers, please, I was just getting my license like you asked. I have 2 small children waiting for me at daycare. I work at the community center helping families. You can call them if you want." "Did I tell you to talk?" Thompson yelled, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her around to face him. That's when everything went wrong. Tanya instinctively pulled back when Thompson grabbed her. It wasn't defiance. It was just a natural human reaction when someone grabs you unexpectedly. But Thompson saw it as resistance. "She's resisting," he shouted to Davis. "No, I'm not resisting," Tanya said, raising her hands in the air. "Please, I'm not fighting you." But it was too late. Thompson grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. The pain shot through her shoulder like fire. "Ow, that hurts, please." Davis joined in, grabbing her other arm. Together, they forced her to the ground face first. The concrete scraped against her cheek as they pushed her down. "Stop. I can't breathe," Tanya cried out. Davis was pressing his knee into her back while Thompson held her arms. What Tanya didn't know was that Mrs. Chen, who owned the flower shop across the street, had installed new security cameras just 2 weeks earlier. The cameras were high definition and captured everything that was happening. "Please, my children are waiting for me," Tanya gasped, trying to turn her head to breathe better. "Should have thought about that before you decided to resist arrest," Thompson said, pressing her face harder into the concrete. Tanya felt something wet running down her face. She couldn't tell if it was tears or blood from where the concrete had scraped her skin. "I wasn't resisting. Please check the cameras. Someone must have seen this." But the officers weren't listening. Thompson was putting handcuffs on her wrists, tightening them more than necessary. The metal cut into her skin. Davis was calling for backup on his radio. "We need a transport unit on Martin Luther King Boulevard. We've got a suspect in custody for resisting arrest and assault on an officer." Assault? Tanya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I never touched either of you. This is wrong. This is all wrong." By now, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk across the street. Some people were recording with their phones, but they were too far away and it was getting dark. The streetlights hadn't come on yet. A young man named Tony, who worked at the gas station on the corner, started walking closer to get a better view. Thompson saw him approaching. "Back up. This is police business," Thompson shouted. Tony stopped walking but kept his phone out. "I'm just trying to see what's happening, officer." "I said back up." Tony reluctantly moved back, but he kept recording. He had a bad feeling about what he was witnessing. Meanwhile, Tanya was still on the ground. Her shoulder was throbbing with pain, and she could feel blood trickling from the scrapes on her face. But worse than the physical pain was the humiliation and fear. "My kids," she whispered. "Someone needs to pick up my kids." Thompson and Davis lifted her up roughly and started walking her toward their patrol car. That's when Thompson's radio crackled with a voice from dispatch. "Unit 47, what's your status on that traffic stop?" Thompson keyed his radio while still holding Tanya's arm. "We have one in custody for speeding, resisting arrest and assault on a police officer. Requesting transport." Tanya tried to speak up. "That's not what happened. I never assaulted anyone." "Shut up," Davis said, pushing her toward the back of the patrol car. As they put her in the back seat, Tanya caught a glimpse of her reflection in the car window. Her face was scraped and bleeding. Her work clothes were torn and her hair was a mess. She looked like she had been in a fight, even though she had never thrown a punch or even raised her voice until they heard her. The daycare would be closing in 10 minutes. Maya and Caleb would be the last kids there, wondering where their mommy was. Tanya's heart broke thinking about them waiting by the window looking for her car. Thompson got in the driver's seat and started filling out paperwork. Davis was outside talking to the backup officers who had arrived. "Officer," Tanya said quietly from the back seat, "can someone please call my husband? My children are at daycare." Thompson looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You should have thought about your children before you decided to fight us." "I didn't fight you. I never fought you." But Thompson was already writing his report and he was writing it his way. According to his version, Tanya had been belligerent from the start, had refused to comply with orders, and had physically resisted arrest by pulling away and trying to strike the officers. None of it was true, but it was his word against hers. And in situations like this, people usually believed the police. As they drove toward the station, Tanya pressed her face against the window and watched her neighborhood go by. She saw people walking their dogs, kids playing in their yards, families having normal Tuesday evenings. She wondered if this was really happening to her. 6 months ago, she had been part of a community task force working with the police department to improve relations between officers and residents. She had sat in meeting rooms with officers, talking about building trust and understanding. Now she was sitting in the back of a police car with a bloody face, facing charges she knew were false. The worst part was knowing that Maya and Caleb were still waiting for her. By now they would be crying, scared that something had happened to their mother. And something had happened. Something that would change everything for the Johnson family. As the patrol car turned the corner toward the police station, Tanya closed her eyes and tried to think. She knew the system. She had worked within it for years, helping families navigate social services and legal issues. But she had never been on this side of it before. She had never been the one who needed help. What she didn't know yet was that Mrs. Chen's security camera had captured every second of what really happened. And what she also didn't know was that her background in social work had given her connections that most people in her situation didn't have. The next few hours would be the worst of her life. But they would also be the beginning of something bigger than she could imagine. Sometimes the most important moments in history start with the most ordinary people just trying to get through their day. 3 hours later, Tanya was sitting in a cold holding cell at the downtown police station. Her face was still bleeding. Her shoulder ached with every breath and she hadn't been allowed to make a phone call yet. The cell was small and smelled like disinfectant and fear. There was a metal bench attached to the wall and a tiny window near the ceiling that let in harsh fluorescent light from the hallway. Tanya kept thinking about Maya and Caleb. By now, her husband Jerome would have realized something was wrong. The daycare would have called him when she didn't show up. He was probably driving around the neighborhood looking for her car, thinking maybe she had been in an accident. He had no idea she was sitting in jail. Down the hall, Officers Thompson and Davis were in the report writing room with their sergeant, Mike Collins. Collins was a 20-year veteran who had seen it all and heard every excuse in the book. "So walk me through what happened," Collins said, settling into his chair with a cup of coffee. Thompson pulled out his notepad. Routine traffic stop for speeding on MLK Boulevard around 6:45. Subject was going 42 in a 35. "Okay, normal stop." "Then what?" "When I asked for license and registration, she started acting funny. Wouldn't look at me directly, kept reaching around in her purse like she was hiding something." Davis nodded. "I could tell from the patrol car that something was off. Blake called me over because she was being suspicious." Collins made notes as they talked. "Define suspicious." "Well, she kept talking about her kids in daycare, trying to make conversation. You know how they do, trying to distract you," Thompson continued. "When I told her to get out of the car, she started arguing with me. This wasn't true, but Collins wrote it down anyway. That's when she got aggressive," Davis added. "Started pulling away when Blake tried to handcuff her. Did she strike either of you?" Thompson paused for just a second. "She tried to. Swung her arm back when I was putting her in cuffs. If I hadn't ducked, she would have got me in the face." More lies, but they sounded believable when two officers told the same story. Collins finished writing and looked up. "Any witnesses?" "Few people across the street, but they were too far away to see anything clearly," Thompson said. "Plus it was getting dark. Any cameras?" "Not that I could see. Just that old flower shop across the street, but I doubt they have security cameras." Collins closed his file. "All right, sounds pretty straightforward. Speeding, resisting arrest, assault on a police officer. Book her and we'll let the DA sort it out." What none of them knew was that Mrs. Chen had already gone home and watched her security footage. She had seen everything, the real version of what happened. But she was scared to get involved. She was an elderly immigrant woman who barely spoke English, and she knew how these things usually went. Meanwhile, Jerome Johnson was frantic. He had picked up Maya and Caleb from daycare, where the staff told him Tanya never showed up. He had called her job, her friends, even the hospitals. No one had seen her. At 10:30 p.m., his phone finally rang. "Jerome Johnson?" a voice said. "Yes, this is Jerome." "Who is this?" "This is Officer Martinez from the downtown precinct." "Your wife is here." Jerome's heart stopped. "Is she okay? Was there an accident?" "Sir, your wife was arrested this evening for speeding, resisting arrest, and assault on a police officer." Jerome almost dropped the phone. "That's impossible. There's been a mistake. Tanya wouldn't hurt anybody. She works with families and children for a living." "Sir, I'm just telling you what the charges are. Bail is set at $5,000. $5,000. Jerome worked 2 jobs, one at a warehouse during the day and another cleaning offices at night. They had maybe $800 in their savings account. Can I talk to her? She'll be processed in the morning. You can see her then." The line went dead. Jerome sat in his kitchen staring at the phone. Maya and Caleb were finally asleep after asking 100 times where Mommy was. He had told them she was working late, but now he didn't know what to tell them. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old that their mother is in jail? The next morning, the local news picked up the story. Channel 7's crime reporter Bill Stevens did a quick segment during the morning show. A local woman was arrested last night after a traffic stop turned violent on Martin Luther King Boulevard. According to police, 34-year-old Tanya Johnson was pulled over for speeding and became combative with officers, ultimately assaulting one of them during the arrest. Johnson is being held on charges of resisting arrest and assault on a police officer. They showed Thompson and Davis walking into the station, looking professional in their crisp uniforms. Then they showed a mugshot of Tanya, her face scraped and bruised, her hair messy, looking exactly like someone who had been in a fight. The story made Tanya look guilty before she ever got to tell her side. At the community center where Tanya worked, her colleagues couldn't believe what they were hearing. Linda Washington, the center director, knew Tanya better than almost anyone. "This doesn't make sense," Linda told her staff during their morning meeting. "Tanya is the gentlest person I know. She's never even raised her voice at work. And we deal with some pretty difficult situations here." But the news was the news, and people were starting to talk. Jerome managed to scrape together enough money for a bail bondsman and got Tanya released that afternoon. When he saw her walking out of the jail, he barely recognized his wife. Her face was swollen and bruised. She walked slowly, favoring her left shoulder. But worst of all, she looked broken. This confident, strong woman who had always been the rock of their family looked like she was afraid of her own shadow. "Baby, what happened to you?" Jerome whispered as he hugged her gently. Tanya started crying for the first time since the arrest. "They hurt me, Jerome, and they're saying I hurt them." On the drive home, Tanya told Jerome everything, how she was just trying to get to the kids, how the officers escalated a simple traffic stop, how they threw her to the ground and lied about what happened. "We need to get you a lawyer," Jerome said. "With what money? We just spent everything we had on bail." That afternoon, Tanya tried to go back to work, but Linda sent her home. "You need to heal first," Linda said kindly. "And you need to figure this out." But figuring it out seemed impossible. How do you fight the police when no one believes you? The local newspaper ran a small story the next day. It was buried on page 7, and it only told the police version of events. The headline read, "Community Center Worker Arrested for Assaulting Police." The story identified Tanya by name and mentioned where she worked. It didn't mention that she had no prior arrests or that she was well known in the community for helping families. It just made her sound like another person who couldn't follow simple police instructions. Tanya's phone started ringing with calls from reporters wanting her side of the story, but her court-appointed attorney told her not to talk to anyone. "Let me handle this," he said during their brief meeting. "These things usually work out if you just keep quiet and let the process run its course." But Tanya knew the attorney wasn't really fighting for her. He had 15 other cases and no time to investigate what really happened. He advised her to take a plea deal, plead guilty to resisting arrest, and the assault charge would be dropped. "I didn't resist and I didn't assault anyone," Tanya told him. "Look, I believe you, but it's your word against 2 police officers. Juries usually side with the cops. You could get 2 years in prison if we go to trial and lose. 2 years in prison. Maya and Caleb would be 10 and 7 by the time she got out. They would grow up thinking their mother was a criminal." That night, Tanya sat at her kitchen table looking at the plea agreement. All she had to do was sign it and admit to something she didn't do, and this would all go away. She would get probation, maybe some community service, but she would also have a criminal record. She would probably lose her job, and every time someone Googled her name, they would see that she pleaded guilty to resisting arrest. Jerome sat down next to her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking the system is rigged," Tanya said quietly. "They beat me up, lied about it, and now I'm supposed to say thank you and admit I was wrong. So what do we do?" Tanya looked at her husband, then at the photos of Maya and Caleb on the refrigerator. "I don't know yet, but I'm not signing this." What Tanya didn't know was that across town, Mrs. Chen was having trouble sleeping. Every night she replayed what she had seen on her security cameras. She knew the truth, but she was scared to speak up. Mrs. Chen had come to America 30 years ago with nothing. She had built her flower shop from the ground up, working 7 days a week. She minded her own business and stayed out of trouble, but she also remembered what it was like to be powerless. She remembered what it was like when people in authority positions took advantage of you because they thought no one would believe you. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Chen made a decision that would change everything. She called the police station and asked to speak to someone about the incident on Martin Luther King Boulevard. She was transferred around to 3 different people before finally reaching Sergeant Collins. "I have cameras," she said in her accented English. "I see what happened to that lady." Collins sat up straighter. "Ma'am, what kind of cameras?" "Security cameras. HD cameras. I see everything." Collins felt his stomach drop. Friday morning came with rain, and Tanya Johnson sat by her bedroom window watching the droplets race down the glass. Her face was still bruised, and every movement reminded her of what had happened 3 days ago. Maya and Caleb had gone to school, but not before asking more questions about why Mommy looked hurt. Jerome had left early for his warehouse job, promising to come home for lunch to check on her. Tanya was supposed to be resting, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. The plea agreement sat on her dresser like a weight on her chest. Her court-appointed lawyer had called twice, pressuring her to sign it. "The offer won't be on the table forever," he had warned, but something inside Tanya refused to give up. Maybe it was her years of social work, helping other people fight systems that seemed impossible to beat. Maybe it was thinking about Maya and Caleb, and what kind of world she was leaving for them. Or maybe it was just knowing that what happened to her was wrong, and wrong things shouldn't win. Tanya picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Most people didn't know this, but 2 years ago, she had been part of a special task force on police community relations. The state had put together a group of community leaders, social workers, and activists to work with law enforcement on improving relationships. That's where she had met Attorney General Patricia Santos. Santos was different from most politicians Tanya had encountered. She actually listened when people talked. She took notes. She asked follow-up questions. During one of the task force meetings, Santos had even given out her direct office number to the community representatives. "If you ever see something that needs immediate attention," Santos had said, "don't go through 10 layers of bureaucracy. Call me directly." Tanya had programmed the number into her phone but never imagined she would need it. She stared at the contact. AG Patricia Santos, direct line. Her finger hovered over the call button. What if Santos didn't remember her? What if she was too busy? What if she didn't believe Tanya's story either? But then Tanya thought about Thompson's knee pressing into her back, about Davis twisting her arms, about the lies they had written in their report. She pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Patricia Santos. Mrs. Santos, this is Tanya Johnson. We worked together on the community policing task force about 2 years ago. There was a pause. Tanya, yes. From the downtown community center. How are you doing? The kindness in Santos's voice almost made Tanya start crying again. Mrs. Santos, I need help. Something terrible happened to me and I don't know what to do. What's wrong? Tanya took a deep breath and told her everything. The traffic stop, the way the officers escalated the situation, the beating, the false charges. She spoke for 15 minutes straight and Santos didn't interrupt once. When Tanya finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Tanya, Santos said finally, are you somewhere safe right now? I'm at home. Stay there. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to any more reporters and don't let anyone pressure you into a plea deal. I'm going to look into this immediately. Ms. Santos, I don't want special treatment. I just want the truth to come out. The truth is exactly what we're going to find. After Tanya hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt since Tuesday night. Hope. Patricia Santos sat in her office on the 15th floor of the State Building, looking out at the city skyline. She had been Attorney General for 6 years, and she had seen plenty of police misconduct cases. But something about Tanya's story bothered her. Tanya Johnson wasn't some random person calling with complaints. Santos remembered her from the task force meetings. Tanya was thoughtful, professional, and dedicated to making things better for families in her community. She was exactly the kind of person who would never assault a police officer. Santos picked up her secure phone and called David Rodriguez, her most experienced civil rights prosecutor. David, I need you to drop everything and look into something for me. What's going on? Santos explained Tanya's situation. I want you to personally review this case. Get all the police reports, interview the officers, and find out if there were any witnesses or cameras in the area. You want me to investigate our own local police? I want you to investigate the truth. Rodriguez had worked for Santos for 4 years. He knew that tone of voice meant she was serious. I'll get started immediately. And David, do this quietly. If there's misconduct here, I don't want evidence disappearing. Rodriguez understood. Police departments had been known to lose paperwork when they knew investigations were coming. Within an hour, Rodriguez was at the downtown police station requesting all files related to Tanya Johnson's arrest. Sergeant Collins seemed nervous when he handed over the paperwork. Pretty straightforward case, Collins said. Officers did everything by the book. Rodriguez nodded but didn't comment. He had learned long ago that when someone insisted everything was by the book without being asked, it usually meant the opposite. Back at his office, Rodriguez spread out the police reports on his desk. Thompson and Davis had written nearly identical accounts of what happened. The stories matched too perfectly, even down to specific phrases and timing. In Rodriguez's experience, when 2 people witnessed the same event, their reports usually had small differences. People see things from different angles, remember details differently. But these reports read like they had been coordinated. Rodriguez called the downtown precinct and requested the dispatch recordings from Tuesday night. Those couldn't be edited or changed after the fact. While he waited for the recordings, Rodriguez decided to drive to Martin Luther King Boulevard and look at the scene himself. The area was typical for that part of town. Small businesses, a few apartment buildings, not much foot traffic. Rodriguez parked where Tanya's car had been and looked around. Across the street was Chen's flower shop. Rodriguez walked over and pushed open the door, setting off a small bell. Mrs. Chen looked up from arranging roses. She was a small woman in her 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands. "Can I help you?" Rodriguez showed his badge and introduced himself. "Ma'am, I'm investigating an incident that happened across the street on Tuesday night." "Did you happen to see anything?" Mrs. Chen's expression changed immediately. She set down her flowers and walked to the front window. "You mean the lady and the police?" Rodriguez's heart rate increased. "Yes, ma'am." "What did you see?" "I see everything. I have cameras." Rodriguez tried to keep his voice calm. "Would it be possible for me to see that footage?" Mrs. Chen studied him for a long moment. "You with the police?" "No, ma'am, I work for the state attorney general. We investigate when there are questions about what happened." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Good, because what I see on my cameras and what police say happened are not the same thing." She led Rodriguez to a small office behind the shop where she had a simple computer setup connected to 4 security cameras. 2 cameras covered the inside of her shop, and 2 covered the street outside. "This one shows everything," she said, pointing to a monitor. Mrs. Chen pulled up the footage from Tuesday at 6:45 p.m. Rodriguez watched in complete silence as the real story unfolded on the screen. He saw Tanya pull over, immediately when the police lights came on. He saw her place her hands on the steering wheel and roll down her window. He saw Thompson approach the car aggressively, even though Tanya was being completely cooperative. He watched Thompson order her out of the car for no clear reason. He saw Tanya comply with every command, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. Then he watched in horror as Thompson grabbed Tanya's shoulder when she tried to explain about her children. He saw her natural reaction to pull back slightly, not resistance, just instinct, and he watched both officers force her to the ground and hold her down while she cried that she couldn't breathe. At no point in the 12-minute video did Tanya resist arrest or attempt to assault anyone, Mrs. Chen, Rodriguez said quietly. "This footage shows something very different from what the officers reported." "I know. That's why I called police station yesterday. But Sergeant, he seemed more worried about protecting his officers than finding truth." Rodriguez felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice professional. "Ma'am, would you be willing to provide a copy of this footage to the Attorney General's office?" "I already make copy," Mrs. Chen said, holding up a USB drive. "I know sometimes evidence disappears when it's inconvenient for police." Rodriguez took the drive with hands that were slightly shaking. In 15 years of prosecuting cases, he had rarely seen such clear evidence of police misconduct. "Mrs. Chen, this footage is going to change everything. Are you prepared for that?" The elderly woman straightened her shoulders. "I come to America with nothing. I build business with hard work and honesty. I cannot watch lies win when I have truth." Rodriguez drove straight back to the Attorney General's office. Santos was in a meeting, but he knocked anyway. "This better be important, David." "It's important." Santos dismissed her other meeting and closed the door. Rodriguez plugged the USB drive into her computer. "Patricia, what you're about to see is going to make you very angry." They watched the footage together in silence. When it ended, Santos sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. Those officers committed assault and then filed false reports to cover it up. And Tanya Johnson is facing criminal charges for their crimes. The news broke at 6 p.m. on Friday evening, and by Saturday morning the entire city was talking about what happened to Tanya Johnson. Channel 7 ran the security camera footage during their primetime newscast. Bill Stevens, the same reporter who had initially portrayed Tanya as the aggressor, now had to tell a very different story. "New video evidence has completely changed our understanding of what happened during Tuesday night's traffic stop," Stevens reported. "Security camera footage from a nearby business shows that Mrs. Johnson was fully cooperative with police and never resisted arrest or assaulted the officers, contrary to the police report. The footage was devastating for Thompson and Davis. Viewers could see everything clearly. Tanya following every command. The officers escalating for no reason. The unnecessary force used against a woman who was simply trying to get to her children. Social media exploded overnight. The hashtag Justice for Tanya started trending. People shared the video thousands of times, expressing outrage at what they saw. But while the public was just learning the truth, David Rodriguez was digging deeper into something that troubled him even more. Saturday morning, Rodriguez sat in his office reviewing Thompson and Davis's personnel files. What he found made his stomach turn. Thompson had been on the force for 8 years and had 17 complaints filed against him for excessive force, 17. Most had been dismissed as unfounded or unsubstantiated by the department's Internal Affairs Division. Davis had been Thompson's partner for 3 years and had 9 complaints. Together, they had been involved in 43 arrests where suspects claimed they were beaten or mistreated. How did these guys stay on the street? Rodriguez muttered to himself. He called Lieutenant Amy Foster, who ran the Internal Affairs Division for the police department. Foster was known for being fair and honest, one of the good ones in a system that often protected bad cops. Amy, this is David Rodriguez from the AG's office. I need to ask you about Officers Thompson and Davis. There was a long pause. What do you want to know? Their complaint history. How did they avoid consequences with so many excessive force allegations? Foster sighed deeply. David, can this conversation be off the record? If you need it to be. Those two have been protected by Chief Morrison for years. Every time Internal Affairs tried to sustain a complaint against them, Morrison would overturn it or find some technicality to dismiss it. Rodriguez felt his anger building. Why would the chief protect officers with that many complaints? Thompson's father was a decorated detective who saved Morrison's life 20 years ago. Morrison feels like he owes the family. And Davis? Davis knows where a lot of bodies are buried, if you know what I mean. Rodriguez understood. Police departments were like any other workplace. Politics, favors, and loyalty often mattered more than doing what was right. Amy, I'm going to need all the complaint files on both officers. Can you help me with that? Officially, I have to go through proper channels. But those files might accidentally get left on my desk while I go to lunch on Monday. Rodriguez smiled. I appreciate your carelessness with important documents. Meanwhile, Chief Morrison was having the worst weekend of his career. The video footage had made him look incompetent at best, corrupt at worst. The mayor had already called twice, demanding explanations. Morrison sat in his office Sunday morning, reviewing the Thompson and Davis files that he had been ignoring for years. Every complaint told the same story. 2 officers who thought their badges gave them the right to hurt people. He thought about all the times he had protected them, all the complaints he had dismissed, all the victims he had failed. Morrison picked up his phone and called his deputy chief, Robert Hill. Bob, we need to talk about Thompson and Davis. I figured this call was coming. What do you want to do? They're suspended without pay, effective immediately. And Bob, start the termination process. Hill was surprised. Morrison had always defended these officers before. Chief, are you sure? The union is going to fight this hard. Let them fight. I'm done protecting people who make us all look bad. Morrison hung up and stared out his office window at the city he had served for 28 years. He had always thought he was doing the right thing by being loyal to his officers. But loyalty to the wrong people wasn't loyalty at all. It was just cowardice. That same Sunday, Tanya was at home trying to process everything that had happened. The phone had been ringing nonstop with reporters, lawyers, and supporters wanting to help. The story had gone national. CNN, NBC, and Fox News had all picked up the footage. Civil rights leaders were calling it a perfect example of why police reform was needed. But for Tanya, it was still personal. She was still the woman who had been hurt by people who were supposed to protect her. Jerome found her sitting on their back porch, watching Maya and Caleb play in the yard. How are you holding up, baby? Tanya leaned against her husband. I keep thinking about all the other people this happened to. People who didn't have security camera footage. People who didn't know someone in the Attorney General's office. You can't save everybody, Tanya. But maybe I can help make sure this doesn't happen to other people. That afternoon, Tanya got a call that surprised her. It was Mrs. Chen from the flower shop. Mrs. Johnson, this is Amy Chen. I hope you don't mind I got your number from the news people. Of course not, Mrs. Chen. I wanted to call you to say thank you. If you hadn't saved that video, I want to tell you something, Mrs. Chen interrupted. I was scared to get involved. For 30 years, I keep my head down, mind my own business. But when I saw what they did to you, I couldn't stay quiet. I'm glad you didn't. My husband, he died 5 years ago. Before he died, he made me promise something. He said, Amy, we came to America because it's supposed to be a place where truth matters. Don't let lies win. So when I saw that video, I heard his voice. Tanya felt tears starting. Mrs. Chen, you saved my life. Not just from jail, but from having to live with people thinking I was a criminal. You saved mine too. I was becoming someone who just watched bad things happen. Now I remember who I wanted to be. Monday morning brought new developments. That would change everything. For Thompson and Davis, Rodriguez had spent the weekend reviewing the complaint files. Amy Foster had accidentally left on her desk. What he found was a pattern of abuse that went back years. There was Maria Santos, no relation to the Attorney General, a college student who claimed Thompson had groped her during a traffic stop in 2019. The complaint was dismissed because there were no witnesses. There was Robert Washington, a delivery driver who said Davis had beaten him during a routine traffic stop because he looked suspicious in a nice neighborhood. The complaint was dismissed because Washington had an old marijuana conviction on his record. There was Jennifer Kim, a nurse who claimed both officers had used racial slurs during her arrest for a parking violation. Her complaint was dismissed because she couldn't prove what was said. 15 different people over 5 years, all telling similar stories about the same 2 officers. All dismissed. All ignored. Rodriguez called Attorney General Santos. Patricia, this is bigger than we thought. Thompson and Davis have been doing this for years. How many victims? At least 15 that we can document. Probably more who never filed complaints. Santos felt sick. David, I want you to contact every person who filed a complaint against these officers. Let them know we're investigating and ask if they want to tell their stories. The local DA's office should have been investigating this pattern years ago. Should have, but didn't. That's why we're taking over. By Tuesday, Rodriguez had tracked down 12 of the previous complainants. When they learned that someone was finally taking their complaints seriously, they all agreed to cooperate. The most powerful interview was with Maria Santos. She was now 24 and working as a teacher. When Rodriguez met with her, she broke down crying. I thought no one would ever believe me, Maria said. When I filed that complaint, they made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was lying. Tell me what happened. I was driving home from studying at the library. Thompson pulled me over and said I was speeding, but I wasn't. When he came to my window, he touched me inappropriately. When I pulled away, he got angry and arrested me for resisting. What happened to the charges? They were dropped eventually, but I had to pay a lawyer with money I didn't have. My parents thought I had done something wrong. I was too embarrassed to tell them what really happened. Rodriguez took detailed notes. Maria, would you be willing to testify in court about this? Will it help stop them from hurting other people? Yes. Then I'll testify. The federal grand jury was convened on Wednesday morning. Rodriguez presented evidence from Tanya's case, the security camera footage, and testimony from the other victims. The grand jury didn't need long to deliberate. They returned indictments against Thompson and Davis for civil rights violations, assault under color of authority, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and filing false police reports. The charges carried potential prison sentences of up to 10 years each. When the indictments were announced, Thompson and Davis were arrested at their homes. The news footage showed them being led away in handcuffs, the same handcuffs they had used on so many innocent people. Chief Morrison held a press conference that afternoon. 6 months later, Tanya Johnson sat in the front row of a federal courtroom, watching officers Blake Thompson and Rick Davis face a jury for their crimes. The trial had taken months to prepare, but prosecutor David Rodriguez had built an overwhelming case. The security camera footage was the centerpiece, but it wasn't the only evidence. 12 victims had come forward to testify about similar experiences with Thompson and Davis. The pattern was clear. These officers had been abusing their power for years, targeting people they thought no one would believe. Thompson's defense attorney tried to argue that the traffic stop had been conducted properly, but the video evidence made that impossible. Every lie in the police report was exposed for the jury to see. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodriguez said during his closing argument, You've seen the video. You've heard from the victims. These defendants violated their oath to serve and protect. Instead, they served themselves and failed to protect the very people they were sworn to help. Davis's attorney attempted a different strategy, claiming his client was just following Thompson's lead. But the evidence showed Davis was an active participant in the abuse, not just a bystander. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. We, the jury, find the defendant, Blake Thompson, guilty on all counts. We, the jury, find the defendant, Rick Davis, guilty on all counts. Tanya felt Jerome squeeze her hand as the verdict was read. In the back of the courtroom, Maria Santos and several other victims were crying tears of relief. Thompson showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. Davis looked back at his family in the gallery, finally understanding the consequences of his choices. Judge Patricia Williams scheduled sentencing for the following month, but legal experts predicted both men would serve significant prison time. Outside the courthouse, Tanya spoke to reporters for the first time since her initial arrest. "This isn't just about what happened to me," she said. "This is about making sure our system works for everyone, not just people who are lucky enough to know someone in power or have security cameras watching over them." A reporter asked, "What would you say to other people who might face similar situations?" "Don't give up. Don't let people tell you that your word doesn't matter. The truth has power, even when it takes time to come out." The sentencing hearing was packed with supporters and media. Judge Williams had received dozens of letters from community members describing how Thompson and Davis had affected their lives. Before announcing the sentences, Judge Williams addressed both defendants. "You were given badges and authority to protect and serve your community. Instead, you used that authority to harm innocent people and then lie to cover up your crimes. Your actions have damaged trust in law enforcement and hurt real families." Thompson received 8 years in federal prison. Davis received 6 years. As they were led away, several victims in the courtroom felt a sense of closure they had never expected to experience. But for Tanya, the legal victory was only part of a much larger story. The case had prompted a federal investigation into the entire police department. The Department of Justice found widespread problems, inadequate training, poor supervision, and a culture that protected bad officers at the expense of public safety. The city was forced to enter into a consent decree, agreeing to major reforms including mandatory body cameras for all patrol officers, independent oversight of complaint investigations, enhanced training on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity, regular audits of officer conduct and complaint patterns, community input on police policies and procedures. Chief Morrison had retired as promised, and the new chief, Linda Foster, formerly of Internal Affairs, was committed to rebuilding trust with the community. But the changes went beyond just policy reforms. With help from civil rights attorney Benjamin Cross, Tanya filed a civil lawsuit against the city and won a settlement of $2.8 million. The money was important for her family's future, but Tanya had bigger plans for most of it. She used $2 million to establish the Justice and Truth Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of police misconduct and supporting reforms to prevent future abuse. The foundation's first program provided legal assistance to people who couldn't afford attorneys when facing false charges. The second program worked to install security cameras in high-crime areas where police interactions were most likely to occur. "If Mrs. Chen hadn't had those cameras, I would probably be in prison right now," Tanya explained at the foundation's launch event. "We need to make sure evidence exists to protect people when the system fails them." Mrs. Chen was one of the foundation's first board members. At 73, she had become an unlikely activist for police accountability. "For too long, I was scared to speak up," Mrs. Chen told the audience. "But staying silent when you witness injustice makes you part of the problem." The foundation's third program was closest to Tanya's heart, working with police departments to improve training and community relations. "I don't hate police officers," Tanya often said in her speeches. "Most officers are good people doing a difficult job, but the bad ones need to be held accountable, and the good ones need better support to do their jobs properly." 1 year after her arrest, Tanya received an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Lisa Martinez from the downtown precinct. I hope you don't mind me calling." Tanya was cautious. She still felt nervous around police despite all the changes that had happened. What can I do for you, Officer Martinez? I wanted to invite you to speak to our new recruits about community relations and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. Tanya was surprised. You want me to speak to police recruits? Yes, ma'am. Chief Foster thinks it would be valuable for new officers to hear your story directly from you, to understand how their actions affect real people and real families. After discussing it with Jerome and her therapist, Tanya agreed. Standing in front of 30 new police recruits was one of the hardest things she had ever done. Her hands shook as she began to speak. A year ago, I was just like any of you might be someday, trying to get home to my family after a long day at work. I never imagined that a simple traffic stop would change my life forever. She told them her story, not with anger, but with the hope that it would help them be better officers. You have incredible power when you put on that uniform, she concluded. You can make someone's day better or destroy their life. The choice is always yours. After her presentation, a young recruit approached her. Ma'am, I joined the police force because I want to help people. Your story reminds me why that matters. What's your name, officer? Officer Johnson, ma'am. No relation, he said with a smile. Tanya laughed, her first genuine laugh in a police station since this whole ordeal began. 2 years after the trial, Tanya was invited to speak at the National Conference on Police Reform in Washington, D.C. The audience included police chiefs, community leaders, and policymakers from across the country. Change is hard, she told the audience. It's easier to keep doing things the way they've always been done. But when systems are broken, we have a responsibility to fix them. She talked about the progress made in her city. Complaints against officers were down 60%. Community trust in police was at an all-time high. And the new accountability measures were working. But most importantly, Tanya concluded, we learned that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something we have to fight for every single day. In the audience, Attorney General Patricia Santos smiled with pride. The phone call that had started everything had led to changes neither of them could have imagined. After the conference, Santos approached Tanya. I have a proposition for you, Santos said. What kind of proposition? I'm running for governor next year. I want you to be my running mate for lieutenant governor. Tanya was stunned. Miss Santos, I'm not a politician. Neither was I when I started. But you understand justice in a way that most politicians never will. You've lived it. Tanya thought about Maya and Caleb, now 10 and 7. She thought about all the families who had been helped by her foundation. She thought about the changes that were still needed. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. That evening, Tanya sat with Jerome on their back porch, the same place she had processed everything that happened 3 years earlier. What do you think? She asked her husband. I think you've already changed more lives than most politicians ever will. But what if I could change even more? Jerome smiled. Then I guess we better start practicing saying Lieutenant Governor Johnson. Tanya looked out at the yard where Maya and Caleb were playing. The same yard where they had played on that terrible Tuesday evening when their mother didn't come home from work. So much had changed since then. Thompson and Davis were in federal prison. The police department had been reformed. Dozens of families had received justice through her foundation's work. But the most important change was simpler than all of that. Maya and Caleb were growing up in a world where their mother had proven that one person, telling the truth at the right time, could change everything. Mommy, Maya called from the yard. Come play with us. Coming, baby, Tanya called back. As she stood up to join her children, Tanya thought about that phone call 3 years ago. The call that had saved her life and changed so many others. Sometimes justice comes down to one person being brave enough to speak.